Hi, I'm Billy Keels, the host of the Going Long podcast. Every week, I'm going to be here interviewing the absolute best in the business as it relates to real asset investing, as well as real Main Street investors. We're going to be having conversations where you can listen in, and that's going to help you to continue on your path to education so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in investing long distance. So make sure that you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you're liking it as well, because that way you can get every single episode as soon as it comes out. And by the way, don't forget to leave today's episode a 5-star review. Let's go ahead and listen to today's conversation. Welcome to the Going Long podcast. I'm your host, Billy Keels, and today we have a very, very special show for you. If you've been looking to understand more about selecting the right location, understanding more about what the criteria are for those, understanding more about specific markets, this is absolutely the show that you're going to want to listen to, that you're going to want to watch, because we have an all-star with us today, the person that's going to help you to understand more about specific locations, about also creating generational wealth. He's a guy who has helped me enormously in terms of my growth and development as an investor, and really, really excited to welcome John Casmon to the show. John, welcome to the show, man.
Billy, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you. Love that, you have launched this platform and sharing your wealth of knowledge and your experience with your audience and helping so many other people try to do the same thing.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Appreciate that. And you've been a major, major inspiration. So, John, you've done everything from, you're a multifamily syndicator with Casmon Capital Group. You're also a world famous podcast host with the Target Market Insights, as well as a marketing expert. Know that you working with a number of really busy professionals who have assets now in the area of around $90 million. So, partnering something that's important for you. Talked about the Target Market Insights, and even on the advertising and marketing, you've been recognized by Black Enterprise Magazine as one of the top executives in marketing and as well as advertising. So there's a lot of different things we want to talk about. We start looking at the Going Long podcast. It's really about understanding how you can make the best decisions for investing beyond your backyard. And you've already started that journey. So we'd really be interested in helping you tell a little bit more about your story, John, in terms of what's the journey you've taken and how you've gotten to this point. Be great to hear from you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, I was someone who worked a corporate job. I did everything that you're told to do to be successful. And I didn't have those examples coming up, right? So my parents really had more of a blue collar jobs. My father worked in a factory for a long time before, worked at a car dealership prior to that in the parts department. My mom worked, more office administrative type roles and jobs, working at a warehouse, more logistics manager, but really more blue collar jobs. So I didn't have the examples to say, hey, if you really want to make it and build financial independence and build wealth for your family, here's how you do it. But I read books, and I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I know is a book that, you really, enjoyed and got you going as well. I read other books about, creating wealth and financial freedom. And one thing that came up over and over and over was investing in real estate. So I'll fast forward a little bit here, but from a corporate America standpoint, I loved marketing. I loved learning about, communications and understanding psychology and how to get people to learn about different things and how to get them the best solutions for the challenges that they're facing. So I went down the marketing path and I worked for General Motors for quite some time. I was there from 2007 to 2011. I worked at advertising agencies, working on major campaigns. But ultimately, what I started to really focus on was building up my own personal real estate portfolio. And in doing that, that really allowed me to see more opportunities, but also facing more challenges. And those challenges really shaped the way I viewed investing, because at first I was focused on building a small portfolio for myself. And with those challenges, not being able to find the deals, using all of my own money and kind of running out of money, quite frankly, because I was saving all of my own money and then investing and then saving my own money and investing, it felt like just a long trek. And then the last piece of it was a lot of work. it was a lot of work for me to go in and do all that just to get a little bit of return. So ultimately, I opened up my ways of thinking and opened up the way we approached it. And that allowed us to start partnering with other people. And that allowed us to scale and do larger deals where we could put in professional property management, professional contractors, and different teams, and ultimately allow us to grow to where we're at today.
Wow, that's phenomenal. So, I mean, looking from not having really the examples around you, blue collar family, really then taking on and doing the different steps to build your own personal portfolio, recognizing that you then were running out of money, you were kind of doing both at the same time, and really because of the fact that you were looking to challenge yourself and way of thinking, it really opened up this whole new world for you, which was really being able to work and partner with others to do things in a much more professional, scalable manner. I think that's phenomenal, really, really phenomenal, John. And so it's interesting that when you decided to do the scaling and looking to do things in a more professional way, you've had this desire to really focus on helping people understand really about locations is what we like to call it, or the target market insights. Can you help us understand really what was the driving force behind you really putting a lot of energy there?
Well, there's two things. For one, you think about real estate, location is key, right? I mean, that's one of the things
Mm.
they tell you, especially real estate agents, right? There's that old saying, location, location, location. And it's true with all real estate investing as well. Now, what I will tell you is it's not so much about, does this house face the lake or any of that kind of stuff, but it is important to understand what's happening in a market so you
Mhm.
can make a sound business plan. It's not to say you have to be in one market versus the other, but it's making sure you're building the right business plan. So the reason this was important for me as a marketer, I knew that market research was a strong component of success. And I wanted to understand how the best investors across the country were finding the best places to invest. What data points were they looking at? How did that influence their business plan? What assumptions and projections were they making based off of these things? I thought it was really important to dive deeper to understand these things because I couldn't find anyone that was talking about this. Everyone else was just talking about, hey, buy real estate, increase the rents and make money. And I'm like, there's a lot of steps y'all are skipping over here. And for me, it started with how do you find the right places to invest in the first place? So that was really important for me. And I think the other part was at the time I was living in Chicago, which is, a big city, number 3 city in the United States as far as population, and prices reflect that in some regards.
Mm.
The south side of Chicago has more kind of affordable Midwest pricing, but on the north side, I mean, you have a condo would go for 400, 500, $600,000 for a condo.
Wow.
So it really depends on where you're at in the city and all those things. But the point is, your dollar didn't stretch as far, and because I was investing in that part of town, that's why I kept running out of money. So I
Hmm.
knew I needed to start looking in other places, but I was fearful that I would make a mistake. And I wanted to understand as I took the philosophy that was working for me in this market, there had to be elements that needed to change as I went to a different city, as I went to a Midwest city like Cincinnati, where I live now, or
Hmm.
as I invested in Texas or Florida or the Carolinas. I knew I needed to understand how those markets differentiated and how I needed to adjust my business plan based on being in a different market. So I really started to lock in on the market research components to learn what were different operators doing, finding the synergies between what I was doing in the markets and the people that I knew in Chicago, and then where were the differences and how did it differ and what are the key elements that are important to understand, because most people can't tell you why they were successful. They can only tell you why they fail. And I needed to really understand, for myself at least, how were they being successful in these different markets? If I talk to someone in Ohio, how is his plan different from the guy in Florida? How is that different from the guy who's in, California, or the person in New York? And really starting to understand, okay, what's true across the board? What's
Hmm.
true for, maybe more cash flow driven markets? What's true for more appreciation driven markets? And that's really what we started to uncover through our Target Market Insights Multifamily and Marketing podcast.
Wow, John, you gave us a lot there, and so and I love that you brought it back to the target market insights, multifamily, and marketing, right? Because a lot of what you just started talking about, in the first two things. Number one, you saw that there was no one doing what you needed to be done, really having a way where you could look at what data was important. You really, once again, and I see this as something that you do frequently, is really looking at the most successful. What are the most successful people looking at? What are they seeing in terms of data that they're analyzing? And also, this may be me paraphrasing a little bit, but you also saw some of the different inefficiencies that can exist in a market. You talked about the north side versus the south side of Chicago, and then really being able to extrapolate that to other different markets and marketplaces. And I really love, because there's a theme here where you recognize that they're from a mistake that you say that you made, right? It's a learning opportunity, because you then look exactly for, what can you do to change to find the solution. And I love those things. I guess to help our going long community really understand a little bit more about that, can you talk to us about what are some of the different criteria when you're looking at a specific location that you want to take into consideration, right? You're looking at a specific market and you want to know more, like help us understand what are some of the things that really can help someone else be successful following in your footsteps.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's two approaches to this, right? The first is if you're an active investor, meaning you are going to be the person who's making the decisions, hiring property managers, or getting the team together. There's one course to take, and then if you're going to be a passive investor, there's a little bit of a different course. So I'll say it for two.
Okay.
The first one is for that active investor. The number one thing you're going to need, you need a strong team. Okay. So you need to find great property managers, you need to find great contractors, great inspectors. You need to build up that team of people who can help you identify everything else you need to do. One of the biggest misnomers that most investors make is they fall in love with what we call an MSA, or metropolitan statistical area, right? Yeah. They fall in love with Dallas, Texas, right? Or they fall in love with Orlando or whatever, but they fall in love with a big city, and they don't go down to the sub-market level. So it's easy to tell people, hey, we're in Dallas, or, you're in Barcelona. Well, listen, every major city, every major market has great areas where more people want to live there, and rents are increasing and prices are increasing for homes. And they're challenging areas or opportunity areas, or, if you want to call them deferred areas, whatever, but they're areas where people don't necessarily want to live, where the schools are not good, where, it's just not as desirable as other parts of the city. So you really have to understand the sub-market level. And I would argue that the sub-market is actually more important than the metro part. And the reason for that is, there's a trickle-down impact sometimes if the numbers on the MSA are so strong that developers just look and say, hey, give me any piece of land in this market because there's so little land left, we'll just develop that. And they'll push out whoever's there. You see this on the West Coast, San Francisco as an example, right? If you look in Oakland or the Bay Area, you see this. Seattle, you see this as well. So you see this as certain markets where they'll take that, even in a rough area, they'll gentrify it or they'll fix it up, they'll redevelop it. And then the next thing they can still attract kind of higher tenants, higher rents, and all that stuff. But that's a hope strategy, just hoping everything continues to push up and go. If you can invest in strong submarkets, where there's demand because of either it's close to transportation, maybe it's close to schools and universities, maybe it's close to major employers, parks, or, other amenities, nightlife, things like that. Those areas are going to be desirable for a long time. And instead of hoping an area develops, which, don't get me wrong, that's a risk adjusted thing where if it does, there could be a big payday in that. But a more sound, a more proven strategy is to invest where there's demand already, there's development happening already, and that track is continuing to progress. And if you can find those areas, we call it the path of progress. If you can find the path of progress, that is a strong way to invest, because you're going to have the community, the neighborhood, the city, local officials. You're going to have everyone else helping you improve that community, which will ultimately drive up rents, which will ultimately drive up housing prices and values, and allow you to thrive and succeed. So that's one of the big things we do is, yes, you want to be in a good MSA because you want people naturally and organically moving to an area. But I think even more important than that is finding those areas, those neighborhoods, or those, suburbs, if you will, in an MSA that are thriving, that are seeing growth, that are seeing investment, understanding at a fundamental level what's driving that, and investing in those communities, because that is where people want to live, and they're going to do that, and they're going to continue to move in those areas. So that's what I would do if I'm an active investor. A passive investor, it's pretty similar. The one big difference is you want to make sure you really understand who is running the show from an operator standpoint. Get to know the operator, make sure that they understand the markets that they're in. If they don't live in that market or they're not local to that market, who on the team is, what's the relationship there, and just really understanding, is this person capable of executing in that market? Once you kind of understand that, you do want to look at those other factors. And I would say, again, don't get caught up in, oh, it's in Dallas and Dallas is a great market, so cool, let's invest in Dallas, or Los Angeles, or I know Los Angeles, let's go. I would say if you're investing from afar, the market itself for you, you shouldn't get too caught up in. You should make sure that the person who you're investing with thoroughly understands that market and is going to be able to navigate any challenges that come up. So just because you know LA, or you know New York, or you know Chicago, or you know Miami, doesn't mean invest in those markets. Understand the fundamentals. And when you look at the fundamentals, and if you can find an operator who is in some of these other markets with strong fundamentals that can deliver solid cash flow, and that, they know where the red tape may lie when it comes to government ordinances or local laws, or the ability to grow business, or even grants and other things that are stimulating the local economy. You want somebody that knows those things. And I would say that's probably more important than just being in a city that you're familiar with.
Okay. Wow. Lots to unpack there. Before I do that though, John, can you help us just understand, because there's a concept that you've talked about a couple of times, and you talked about an operator. So can you help maybe our going along community understand, when you say operator, who is that person, or who is that member of the team?
Yeah. So when I started investing, I didn't know anything about apartment syndication at all. Okay. And apartment syndication is simply when you pool money together. So instead of you going out and buying a property and me going out and buying whatever I got in my bank account, and someone else buying whatever they can afford with their reserves and their capital, we all bring our money together.
Mhm.
And together we go out and buy a property. And because we have more money, we can buy a bigger property, a higher grade property. We can hire professional property management and all these different things. So when that happens, there's two groups. There's what we call our general partners, who actually lead the day-to-day operations. They come up with the business plan. They oversee the management. They hire property management companies and all the vendors, and they are responsible for executing the deal. So picture them as, let's picture like being on a train, right? So picture them as kind of the train conductor and kind of the crew. So they're going to get us to the destination, but they're working, and we're all on a train together, but they're kind of the train crew that's getting us to that destination. And then you have the other group, which are limited partners, or the passive investors.
Mhm.
Now, these individuals, they will invest their money, but the general partners are running all the show, and they're making all the decisions. So those limited partners, they really don't have anything else to do. That's why they're passive investors. They
Mhm.
sit back, they collect their checks, and they can ask questions, and they certainly want to stay abreast of what's happening with the deal, any challenges or concerns that come up. But ultimately, the general partners are going to run it and make those decisions. So for them, just like you being on that train ride, you're a passenger. So you're getting to that same destination, but you're a passenger. You're not getting up, going to the train conductor and telling them to make a left at the next stop. So, right, you're kind of sitting back, you're watching it, you have questions, you ask your questions, but you can go along for the ride. So it's kind of a similar approach to that, where you have two people, you've got the general partner and you have your limited partner, all going to the same destination, two different roles in how to get there.
Excellent. I really appreciate you helping to clarify that concept, and really helping us to understand exactly who the operator is, so that when you're looking for the conductor of that train, that you are selecting the right conductor. So I just want to go back, because when you talked about the active and the passive investor, just a couple of different things that you helped us to understand, really, when we're looking at some of the key things that we want to look for. You talked about the path of progress, looking at those areas where you can also see very strong demand factors. You talked about having strong transportation. You talked about being able to have major employers, which are also some of the different things that you want to take into consideration, whether you are someone who is looking to actually be the conductor of the train, or you're just looking to be on the train and being taken from destination A to B by the conductor of the train. So a lot of gold that you dropped there, John. So really appreciate it. John, there's this concept also too that, and I know it's close to your heart. And it's this concept of generational wealth. I know it's something that you talk about a lot. I know that it's something that you have a real passion for. Can you help us to understand what's the driving force behind that for you? And also, as we're thinking about investing, how that could also be another engine, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to where we started, right? With what we're taught, right? What are we taught to do to be successful, and what does success look like to you? And every individual has to ask themselves this question, right? As you think about your life and the life you want to live, the legacy you want to create, what is that? What are people going to say about you when you're gone? What will your parents or your kids, I'm sorry, what will your kids say about you when they talk to their kids? What will your grandkids say to you, to their kids? What is the legacy and the impact you're going to make? And that's just family. There are other things that we're interested in. What about our community? What about our causes? What about the other things that we're passionate about? So as you start to think about your overall impact, that starts to put some depth to the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis. We're not robots. We're not put on this earth to just work our jobs, make money like it's a video game, and then die, and just enjoy the little bit of time you get with your family or your friends and, going to brunch. There's more to life than that. And I hope that, as we're recording this and during COVID-19, I hope many of us are being enlightened to a larger purpose of how we spend our time. And it's not just about working nonstop. So for me, part of what I had to do was step back and think about the legacy that I would like to live and leave for my family.
Mm.
And that starts with, financial independence, right? So taking care of our family financially, where they are set up and they can, they're not worried about how they're going to make money. The second part, and the way more important part for me, is helping other people do the same. And that's why we do what we do with the podcast. That's what we do when we launch our coaching platform. And that's what we do when we work with other investors, because ultimately there's only so many hours in a day. And I learned this the hard way when I was working, full time and trying to take, the passive or the money I was making from that job and putting it into real estate investments, but still running the real estate investments. I was really getting stretched very thin and trying to do all those things. And ultimately, when I was talking to other people and trying to get them to do the same thing, not with me, by themselves. And they were looking at me like, no, I have no interest in doing that. But, if you find a deal, I'd be interested in investing. And I think that really let me say, okay, there are people who know real estate has the ability to change the trajectory of their life and create passive income for them. They just may not be willing to invest the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, the years to learn how to do it properly. Everybody doesn't want to listen to every single podcast and read every single book and travel to all these different events to learn how to be a good real estate investor. Many of them want to treat it just like the stock market and say, hey, give me the Dow and the S&P, and let's pick a couple blue chips and let's go. And when that really opened up, that many people wanted to get the same kind of benefits without doing that kind of work, it made sense for us to educate people first and foremost on what they do need to know, because you still want to understand the basics and the fundamentals. But there's an opportunity to help people get the benefits they're looking for and grow their portfolio. So for me, legacy is really important because I want to make sure that when I'm gone, that people look back on my life and say, man, this guy really helped a lot of people. And that's the influence that I want to have on them, is helping other people either create wealth for themselves, create wealth for their families. But I would say even outside of money, this thing is really about the impact you have on people. And that's really the biggest thing. I hope that people don't really talk about money or anything like that when they talk about, the life that I've lived in particular. I hope it's more about the passions that, we were involved with, the things that we care about. I'm a part of a nonprofit called Surge for Water. And it's really all about, trying to create trying to help kind of the global water crisis by creating sustainable communities and really investing in these communities where they can kind of take care of themselves. And as we've seen with this global pandemic, there's so much going on, but there are people who don't have access to clean water. something as simple as that, where they don't have access to clean water, are not even just monetary, but actually going out into the field and helping to, contribute to these communities. That makes a big difference. So for me, if you look at Bill Gates right now, I mean, Bill Gates just announced that he's going to basically invest in building these, the ventilators and the different materials that are needed right now. He's just going to do it himself,
Mm.
right? Like if you have wealth, real wealth, you can either use the financial elements of that to help impact others and impact community, but you can also invest in the causes that are really important. So, this isn't necessarily about the money piece to it. While it's great to get that and have that peace of mind, but if you want to travel the world, spend that time with your family, because when that time is gone, that time is gone. So part of it for me is just sitting on a simple nature. It's investing in my kids. It's making sure that they see me every day or most days, where we can make memories together, and they can be the kind of people that would make their family proud. So it's things like that when you think about legacy. There are a couple different tiers to it, and I would say this started for me looking at my grandparents. There was a picture I saw when I was a kid of my grandmother, and this had to be in, like, I don't know, the 50s or something like that. So my grandmother, African American woman, and she's wearing like these white gloves and like this white hat and kind of a black dress with like some shawl looking thing. I don't know, but she's in this uniform, and it's all these other people. It's like 12 women in this uniform. My grandmother's the only black woman in this picture. No, it's from the 50s or the 60s. Okay. And this is like, 50s or 60s, civil rights. Like,
And
so I don't know what that group was. No clue. But for my grandmother to be in that picture and in that group, it tells you that they thought a certain way of her to, I'm going to say accept her, but the point being is that she carried herself, and she was of a approach where she could run with anybody
mhm.
during that time in that era, right? And ultimately that goes back to legacy. She was a sweetheart and a wonderful woman, but she always pushed us to be the best versions of ourselves that we could be. And I think that's something we think about legacy. This is why I'm able to talk to you about this. Um, that's what you want to have. You want to have the ability to do that. I think all of us do. All of us want to have the people we love look at us and say, man, I'm so happy to have this person in my life. Or let me tell you what this person did for me. And let me tell you about the influence and the impact this person had. So we try to help as many people as we can to take their goals and what they want to accomplish and just make it bigger. How do you
Mm.
actually have a real impact? And part of that is freeing up your time. Part of that is kind of getting passive income, so you're not as worried about how you're gonna pay your bills or pay for retirement. But if you could take care of those two things, what would you actually do? Once you remove money from the equation, what is the real impact you want to have in the world? And I think that's where you get to a real sense of purpose.
Man, that's just it's powerful stuff, right, John? So being able to understand the impact of seeing a picture of your grandmother, and that has affected you positively to this day, to the point that you continue to go out, you continue to look for solutions, and you stated it over and over. It's really about impact. It's about the passion, right? When you talk about generational wealth, it's not just about the what sometimes could be misperceived as just the money, right? You mentioned it over and over, the impact, the legacy, and I think that this is one of the main drivers, and it's also one of the reasons that you continue to go out and impact so many lives, not just with the target market insights. And one of the things we really didn't even talk about, one of the ways that you're impacting people and connecting people in a way that is a safe environment. I know that you in your Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit is something that you're really passionate about, so that you can once again go out and make an impact on the lives of other people. So it's wonderful to hear you say that, and it's a wonderful to also see that that's not just what you say, but how you live and the impact that you are making on people around the globe. So I really appreciate you sharing your perspective on and why generational wealth is so important, and how you interpret that. So greatly appreciated. And John, as you know, we're getting with the going long podcast, there's a couple things that I want to ask you. I kind of have three questions that I'd like to wrap up today's call with, or today's session with. And the first one, of course, I love investing in the US and I love living in Europe. And so I'm interested in what, in terms of your favorite European city, either that you visited yourself or that is kind of like the destination that you want to go and visit in Europe. What is that? What's that destination?
Man, that's a great question. I've been to both Barcelona and Madrid, and I love them both, but they're very different cities. So I will tell you, the perfect trip for me is going to Barcelona for like 3 days and then going to Madrid for like 3 days. But out of all of Europe, we've been to Paris. I've been to Nice. I love Nice, by the way. It's an amazing place. Haven't been to Italy yet, so we'll try to get out there sometime when all this is over.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed Barcelona. I thought Barcelona was great. And Madrid felt like a great place to just immerse yourself. You know, if you're going to stay there for an extended period of time, I think it's a great place.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to see you over here in Barcelona again. So let me know. I know we talked about that. The second thing is kind of when we think about the mistakes, right? Everybody learns a lot from mistakes. Something that you mentioned earlier, that's a focus and things. But what would you say is the biggest mistake? And more importantly than the mistake, what was the learning that you took away from that mistake?
Yeah, I would say the biggest mistake that we've made really comes down to our vetting process of people.
Okay.
And part of that is, sometimes we go off of recommendations, and especially if you're looking for someone. We had a contractor that was recommended, and we ended up working with them. And the reality is that it was more than he could handle, is what I think it came down to. And part of what we try to figure out is, when you vet people, they may be good people, but you also have to give some context of how much you can put on them. If they haven't built out a team and they're not properly situated and surrounded, you may overwhelm them. If you've got a larger project that, maybe they've done 5 units at a time, but they can't really take on 20 units at a time or 10 units at a time. So just really understanding, how do we do it? And I would say the key lesson for us is not so much about that person, but us. I can't control what other people do. I can't control whether someone succeeds or fails, really. I can put different processes in place, but for us, it's how do we reflect on every single one of these occurrences, create a new system or process, if this, then that. That way we are better positioned for success going forward. And then also just learning from every experience. So I think that's the biggest thing for us, is just continue to self-reflect. How do we get better at this? How do we help other people get better at this? And by doing those things, we very rarely make the same mistake twice.
Love that. Love that. Really looking internally, taking that learning opportunity, seizing it, and then making sure moving forward that you minimize that happening again.
Let me give you a quick extreme example just to really illustrate this point.
Please.
I had a contractor who stole $25,000 from me. Okay. Now, he stole the money, so clearly he's the one at fault, right? But that doesn't help me to just say, oh, this guy stole the money. What helps me is to say, all right, how can we prevent this from happening again? One, let's make sure we did run like criminal background, all that kind of stuff, by the way. But one, let's change the process of when we deliver money, right? Maybe we pay for materials and we don't pay for labor until the work is done. Maybe we get all waivers signed before any money is handed off, right? So maybe money is put into an escrow account, you know what I mean? So there's different things that we can control to make sure it doesn't happen again. But it's not so much to say, oh, this guy, he took my money. He did, but that doesn't protect me going forward. The lesson's not learned. The lesson comes in, how do you react to it? Not emotionally, but process-wise, that allows you to thrive going forward.
I love how you stated that. It's a lesson, and really focusing on the process. And once again, whether you are looking to do something yourself or looking to work with others, these are the types of questions that you can understand and ask just to make yourself in a better position. So thanks for clarifying that and giving us that really concrete example. And John, the last is really about learning as well, right? And a lot of it has to do with reading. I know that's something that is really important for you. So if you could share, what is what is the book that's had the biggest impact on you, and what lesson did you learn from that book?
It's hard to pick one book. There are a lot of, you got a ton of books behind you there in the picture. It's hard. It's hard to pick one book. I've already mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad, which I think is a staple. To give your audience a couple others that I think are really helpful, The Power of Focus is one I really enjoyed.
Okay.
And the reason that book stood out to me was it it kind of went back to what we just talked about. It helped me understand how much we actually control, even in situations where we don't think we are in control. Many of your listeners right now are quarantined with their family, and we are doing the same. And as you spend a whole lot of time with the people you love the most, with no time outside and no breaks in sight, you can get a bit frustrated, at times with them. And the Power of Focus talks about relationships and how to proactively manage these things. There's a tip they give where it talks about each week, maybe you sit down with your spouse and you rate yourselves on a scale of 1 to 10. And let's say I sit with my wife and she says, John, you were a 7. You accept it. No, you don't push back. You say, okay. The only question you ask, what could I have done to get a 10? And then she can tell you throughout the week what you could have done, and you just take notes on that, right? And so it's a simple book and it's pretty straightforward, but those are concepts that I think at the time when I started reading it, it was really big for me to just realize how much power we actually have, and that's critical. Even going back to the finances, a lot of times when people are living afar, like I was living in Chicago, and Chicago wasn't an ideal market to start investing with other people at the time. For your listeners who are out in Europe somewhere, it may not be feasible to buy a single family house or a condo in your market. But by asking yourself, how can I, and starting to think about and focusing on the challenge and coming up with potential solutions, you can start to identify what those answers may be. And that may be investing in a passive deal in the United States, or, maybe investing in a fund or doing some other approach, right? But by really just focusing on the way you think, the opportunities just open up. If you got time, I got one more book that I absolutely love.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's a great book, New York Times bestseller. And the book really breaks down the small tasks, the small details that we do every single day, and how we can create great habits, not focusing on goals so much in the big
Mhm.
picture, but really focusing on who we want to become and the small daily things we can implement immediately to take the right steps to go into that direction.
Wow. So, okay, fantastic. So, Atomic Habits and The Power of Focus, those are two. So, we got two for the price of one. So, appreciate that. And then also being able to get a better understanding of, even when somebody takes $25,000 out of your pocket, what are the lessons that you can learn from that? And like I said, love to be able to see you here in Barcelona. If it's a destination you want to come back to, doors always open, John. So, today we've had a chance to really learn a lot about a guy from a blue collar family who's taken on the opportunity to really look forward to new opportunities, grow, expand, has become an expert in making an impact on people's lives, understanding really how to get the most out of every specific market or location that you are looking to invest in, either doing that actively or passively, as we talked about before. And really all of this with a very humble and extremely focus on having impact on people's lives, and doing that in a way that's done across generations. So, John, this has absolutely filled my heart having you here and sharing your story with the Going Long listeners. And I would love for you to tell us more about how we can get in touch with you, connect with you, learn more about you, help us understand what we can do to connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Listen, Billy, thank you for having me on. For anyone who wants to learn more, first and foremost, if you are interested in investing afar, one of the things that I think helps people is really looking at a sample deal, because it doesn't get real for me, at least, until I can review something where the package is all there. So I've actually put together a sample deal that's available on our website. If you go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal, you'll be able to download that for free and take a look at both, the overview of the team, the overview of the market, the overview of the deal, what the business plan is, and that construct, just so you get a sense of what a deal looks like and what kind of things in the market are important to understand and pay attention to. I think that could be very helpful for listeners. So check that out at casmoncapital.com/sample deal. Now, to get in touch with me, as you mentioned, we've got our Target Market Insights Multifamily Marketing Podcast. That's available anywhere you listen to podcasts. So Apple, iTunes, or Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the other ones, platforms where they have podcasts. You can check that out. And then I'm on social media, primarily on LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach me. LinkedIn, just search John Casmon and I'll be there. And then lastly, if you want to shoot me an email directly, I will respond. My email address is john@casmoncapital.com.
Awesome, John. So I appreciate that. So make sure everybody that you're connecting with John. So john@casmoncapital.com. You can find him on LinkedIn, and that's CASMON. And definitely check him out at the Target Market Insights, Multifamily and Marketing. And excellent idea, John, on having that sample deal. So go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal. So been a power-packed episode. Really, really appreciate it. For our Going Long listeners, this is Billy Keels once again. We're looking forward to you joining us on the next episode. Go out and make it a great day. Freedom! Wow, don't you love hearing from top-notch experts in the field? You know, when I was getting started, I really wish that I would have had access to such experts. And even more, I wish they would have given me like a really simple list of things to follow so that I could have gotten to my goals much faster and been much happier even sooner. So that's why I've created for you the 7 things that you should avoid in order to be successful in long distance investing. And you can pick that up really easily by going to billykeels.com/7 things to avoid. And also, if you liked today's episode, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our very next episode, so go out and make it a great day.